The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched out like a metallic cathedral, its walls lined with viewing screens showing 1,000 different worlds. Representatives from 47 species sat in their assigned seats, their attention focused on the human standing at the center platform. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood with her hands clasped behind her back, her dark blue uniform crisp and formal. She had been speaking for nearly an hour, and she could feel the weight of their stares. The Krynox delegate shifted in his seat, his forearms crossing over his massive chest. His species had conquered 12 systems through pure military might, and he wore his battle scars like medals. Next to him sat the Velthari representative, a being made of crystalline structures that pulsed with soft light. The Velthari had never lost a war in 3,000 years of recorded history. And in the highest seat, the ancient Kuvan observer watched with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall across millennia. Elena finished her presentation and stepped back. The holographic display behind her showed Earth's history, its wars, its weapons, and its long journey to the stars. The chamber fell silent for a moment before the Krynox delegate spoke. "Your species confuses us, human," he said, his voice like grinding stones. "You show us weapons that could destroy planets. You show us military strategies that span thousands of years. Your history is filled with conflicts, battles, and wars. And yet for the past 150 years you have avoided every major conflict. You negotiate when others would fight. You retreat when others would advance. You speak of peace when you clearly have the tools for war." Elena met his gaze without flinching. "We do have those tools, Counselor. That is precisely why we speak of peace." The Velthari representative made a sound like wind chimes. "We have reviewed your military history extensively. Your species fought 2 global wars within 30 years of each other. You created weapons of atomic fire and used them. You developed biological agents, chemical weapons, and machines of war that even we find impressive. But then you stopped. Why?" "Because we learned the cost," Elena replied simply. The Krynox delegate snorted. "Cost? Every species pays costs in war. That is the nature of conflict. But you humans seem paralyzed by it. You maintain massive defense forces but refuse to use them. You study warfare obsessively but choose diplomacy at every turn. You have the strength to fight but lack the courage to do so." Elena felt a flash of anger but kept her voice calm. "We don't lack courage, Counselor. We understand something that perhaps you don't." "And what is that?" the Krynox challenged. "We understand war," Elena said, "not as a concept or a tradition, not as an honorable test of strength. We understand it as it truly is." The ancient Kuvan leaned forward slightly. His interest clearly piqued. "Explain this understanding, human." Elena took a breath. "When my people were still confined to one planet, we fought each other constantly. Tribe against tribe, nation against nation, ideology against ideology. We perfected the art of killing our own kind. We created weapons so terrible that we could have ended all life on our world dozens of times over, and we came very close to doing exactly that." She activated another hologram, showing images from Earth's past. Battlefields covered in bodies, cities reduced to ash, forests turned to mud and blood. "This is what we learned. War isn't glorious. It isn't honorable. It's brutal, efficient destruction of everything we claim to value. When we finally reached the stars and met other species, we had already learned the hardest lesson any civilization can learn. That you were too weak to fight?" the Krynox suggested with a laugh. "That we were too strong," Elena corrected him. "And that strength, without restraint, leads only to extinction." The chamber murmured with discussion. The Velthari representative spoke again. "You say you understand war, but your actions suggest fear. You avoid conflict. You back down from challenges. You accept insults rather than respond with force. These are not the actions of a species that understands war. These are the actions of a species that fears it." Elena smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Perhaps you're right, Counselor. Perhaps we do fear war, but not in the way you think." Before anyone could respond, the Kuvan raised a hand for silence. "I have reviewed the human application for full council membership. Your species meets most of the requirements. Your technology is adequate. Your diplomatic corps is competent. Your cultural contributions are valuable. However, there is concern about your military capabilities." "We have significant military capabilities," Elena pointed out. "You have the tools, yes," the Kuvan agreed. "But you lack the will to use them. In the Galactic Council, all member species must contribute to collective defense. We have enemies that do not negotiate. We face threats that cannot be reasoned with. If we grant you full membership, we need to know that humanity will fight when necessary. We will fight when necessary, Elena said firmly. But when do you consider it necessary? The Krynox challenged. You have shown that you will accept tremendous insults, territorial losses, and economic damage rather than engage in military action. What would it take for humanity to actually go to war? Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she said, an enemy that gives us no other choice. A threat to our survival or the survival of others we have sworn to protect. We don't fight for honor or glory or territory. We fight only when all other options have failed. The Krynox shook his head. Then you are not warriors. You are cowards with weapons. The chamber erupted in discussion. Some delegates agreed with the Krynox. Others argued for humanity's admission despite their perceived weakness. The Velthari representative suggested that humans could be valuable in diplomatic roles, while leaving military matters to stronger species. Finally, the Kuven called for order. We will vote on humanity's application. However, given the concerns raised about military reliability, I propose we grant humanity provisional membership with protected species status. Elena's jaw tightened. Protected species was the lowest military classification in the Council. It was reserved for races that couldn't defend themselves and required protection from stronger members. It was essentially a polite way of calling humanity weak. We don't need protection, Elena said. Then prove it, the Krynox replied. When the time comes, show us that humans are more than their weapons. Show us you can actually use them. The vote was called. Humanity was accepted into the Galactic Council with protected species status. Elena accepted the decision with a formal bow, but inside she felt a mixture of frustration and concern. The Council had misunderstood humanity completely. They thought humans feared war because they were weak. They had no idea of the real reason. As the session ended and delegates began to leave, the ancient Kuven approached Elena. You said something interesting, Ambassador. You said you understand war as it truly is. What did you mean by that? Elena looked at the ancient being. We understand that war isn't won by the side with the most courage or the strongest weapons. It's won by the side willing to do whatever it takes, and once you start down that path, it's very hard to remain the person you were before. The Kuven studied her for a long moment. I wonder, human, if your species might understand war better than any of us. And I wonder if that's exactly what frightens you about it. Elena didn't answer. She simply nodded politely and left the chamber. Behind her, the Galactic Council continued their discussions, unaware that within 6 months they would discover exactly what humanity meant by understanding. 6 months had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Council. The ceremony had been formal and cold, with human diplomats receiving their credentials while the Krynox delegate made jokes about protected species to anyone who would listen. Elena had returned to Earth and filed her reports recommending patience and continued diplomatic efforts. The Council would learn to respect humanity in time, she had written. They just needed to see humans as reliable partners. Then the Zephrons arrived. The first reports came from a mining colony on the edge of Council space. The distress signal was brief and confused. Something had attacked from dark space, moving faster than any known species. The colony went silent within hours. The Council dispatched a Krynox battle group to investigate. They found nothing but wreckage and empty buildings. Every living being had vanished. Within a week, 3 more colonies fell. The pattern was always the same. Fast attack, overwhelming force, complete disappearance of all inhabitants. The Council convened emergency sessions. Intelligence officers worked around the clock to identify the enemy. When they finally captured visual data from a defense satellite, the Council chamber fell silent. The creatures were unlike anything they had seen before. They moved in perfect coordination, thousands of individuals acting as one. Their ships were organic, grown rather than built. They consumed everything in their path, stripping worlds of resources and taking populations as slaves or food. The Council's xenobiology experts identified them as a hive mind species, calling them Zephrons after the Greek god of the west wind, because they swept across worlds like a storm. The Krynox were the first to engage them in open battle. Their fleet was the pride of the Council military, with warships that had conquered systems and warriors who had never known defeat. They met the Zephron swarm in the Carter system with confidence. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it was over, 70% of the Krynox fleet was destroyed or disabled. The survivors retreated in shock. The Council realized they faced an enemy unlike any they had fought before. The Zephrons didn't care about honor or territory or negotiations. They simply consumed and moved on. Emergency protocols were activated. Every member species was ordered to contribute their full military strength to the defense effort. Elena received the notification while reviewing trade agreements in her office on Earth. She read the message 3 times, feeling a cold weight settle in her stomach. She immediately requested a video conference with the Council Military Command. The Velthari Fleet Commander appeared on her screen, his crystalline form flickering with stressed patterns. Ambassador Vasquez, we need every available human ship. The Zephrons are moving toward the core systems. We estimate they have already taken 15 worlds. What tactical approach are you using? Elena asked. The commander seemed surprised by the question. Standard defensive formations. We're establishing fortified positions at key systems. Honor guard protocols for ship-to-ship combat. We're using the traditional response to invasion. Elena closed her eyes briefly. Commander, with respect, traditional approaches don't work against a hive mind. They adapt too quickly. They don't care about honor or formations. They only care about efficiency. These are proven methods, the commander said stiffly. They have served the Council for thousands of years. Against enemies who fight like you do, Elena replied. The Zephrons aren't like that. You need to change your tactics. We don't have time for experimental strategies, the commander said. We need ships and we need them now. The Council is calling on all members, including protected species. How many vessels can humanity provide? Elena took a breath. We'll provide our full fleet. But I need authorization for human commanders to operate with independent tactical authority. The commander made a dismissive gesture. Your fleet will be integrated into Council command structures. We cannot have uncoordinated actions during a crisis of this magnitude. Elena wanted to argue, but she knew it was pointless. The Council wasn't ready to listen. They would have to learn the hard way. Understood, Commander. I'll relay the orders. Our fleets will deploy within 48 hours. She ended the call and immediately contacted Earth's military headquarters. Fleet Admiral Chen appeared on her screen, his weathered face showing concern. I saw the reports, Ambassador. This is bad. It's going to get worse, Elena said. The Council wants our ships, but they won't listen to our tactical recommendations. They're going to fight the Zephrons like they're fighting other Council species. That won't work, Chen said flatly. I know, but we don't have authorization to operate independently. Not yet, Elena paused. Admiral, the Zephrons are moving toward human colonies on the frontier. New Sacramento, Port Victoria, and the Kepler settlements. They'll hit those worlds before the Council can establish any defense. Chen's expression hardened. Are we authorized to defend our own territory? The Council hasn't specifically addressed it. They're focused on core system defense. Elena met his eyes through the screen. But I'm giving you direct orders as senior diplomatic representative. Protect our people. Use whatever methods are necessary. Whatever methods? Chen repeated, making sure he understood. Whatever methods, Elena confirmed. Don't wait for Council approval. Don't worry about their rules of engagement. Just keep our people alive. Chen nodded slowly. Understood, Ambassador. We'll take care of it. 3 days later, the Zephrons hit New Sacramento. It was a farming colony with 15,000 inhabitants and minimal defenses. Intelligence predicted it would fall within hours, just like the other colonies. The Council Military Command noted the attack in their reports but couldn't spare forces for relief. New Sacramento was considered lost. But New Sacramento didn't fall. The reports that came back confused the Council analysts. Human ships had engaged the Zephrons, but not in traditional fleet formations. They used hit-and-run tactics, striking supply ships and retreating before the main swarm could respond. They laid trap fields that looked like debris but exploded when Zephron ships passed through. They broadcast captured Zephron communication signals, creating chaos in the hive mind coordination. On the ground, human defense forces didn't hold positions. They evacuated civilians to underground shelters and then disappeared into the terrain. When Zephron ground forces came looking for them, they found ambushes and traps. Roads collapsed into hidden pits. Buildings exploded when entered. Supply depots were poisoned. And everywhere, human soldiers struck from unexpected angles and vanished before the Zephrons could respond. The Zephrons adapted, as hive minds do. They changed their approach, becoming more cautious and more thorough. But by then, human forces had changed tactics again. They started psychological operations, broadcasting the sounds of dying Zephyrons across all frequencies. They destroyed Zephyron egg chambers and left the remains where other Zephyrons would find them. They made the cost of attacking so high that the hive mind decided to avoid the human colony and move to easier targets. New Sacramento survived. So did Port Victoria and Kepler, and every other human frontier colony the Zephrons attacked. The Council Military Command was baffled. They reviewed the tactical reports with growing discomfort. The Velthari fleet commander called Elena again. "What are your forces doing?" he demanded. "These tactics are not standard military doctrine. They're using deception, false retreats, and terror weapons. One of your commanders broadcast Zephyron death screams for 6 hours straight to prevent an attack. This is not honorable warfare." Elena's expression was cold. "No, Commander. It's effective warfare. There's a difference. This is savagery." This is war," Elena interrupted. "Real war, not the ceremonial battles you're used to. We tried to tell you. We tried to warn the Council. But you didn't listen." The Krynox delegate appeared on the communication channel, his face twisted with anger. "You humans claim to fear war, but you fight like demons. You show no honor, no courage, only base cunning and cruelty." Elena leaned forward toward the camera. "We don't fear war, Counselor. We fear what we become when we wage it, and now you're seeing exactly what we meant. This is what happens when humans stop holding back. This is what we tried to avoid." The chamber fell silent. Elena continued, her voice hard. "You called us cowards because we chose peace. You gave us protected species status because you thought we were weak. But we're not weak, and we never were. We just understood something you didn't. When survival is at stake, when it's kill or be killed, humans don't fight by rules. We fight to win, by any means necessary." The Veltari commander's crystalline form pulsed with confused colors. "But you said you dreaded war." "We do," Elena said. "Because we know exactly what we're capable of. You're seeing it now. And this is just the beginning." She paused, letting her words sink in. "The Zephrons are pushing toward the core systems. Your traditional tactics are failing. You've lost how many worlds now? 15, 20? How many more will fall before you're willing to admit that honorable warfare isn't working?" No one answered. Elena continued. "I'm formally requesting full tactical authorization for human forces. Not integration into your command structure. Independent authority." Fleet Admiral Chen arrived at Council Strategic Command with a team of 20 human military officers. They carried data pads and holographic projectors, and they looked tired. The Council's grand strategy room had been designed to inspire awe, with its massive star maps and displays showing the entire known galaxy. Chen barely glanced at it. He had work to do. The Velthari fleet commander, 3 Krynox generals, and representatives from a dozen other species waited in the briefing area. They looked at the humans with a mixture of curiosity and resentment. The humans had succeeded where Council forces had failed, but their methods were disturbing. Now the Council had given them authority to plan the counteroffensive, and no one was quite sure what that meant. Chen placed his data pad on the central console and activated it. The star map changed, showing Zephyron movements in red and Council forces in blue. There was a lot more red than blue. "Let's start with the basics," he said without preamble. "You're losing this war because you're fighting it wrong. Everything you're doing plays to the Zephron's strengths and ignores their weaknesses." One of the Krynox generals bristled. "Our tactics have won wars for 3,000 years. Against opponents who fight like you," Chen replied. "The Zephrons don't, they're a hive mind. They adapt instantly to your strategies because they share information across their entire species. Every ship, every soldier, every creature is connected. When you fight them in traditional formations, you're predictable. They know what you're going to do before you do it." "Then how do you propose we fight them?" the Velthari commander asked. Chen pulled up a new display. "We make them adapt so fast they can't keep up. We use tactics they don't expect. We attack targets that seem irrational but hurt them strategically. We make them afraid, confused, and unable to trust their own adaptations." "Afraid?" the Krynox general laughed. "They're a hive mind. They don't feel fear. Everything fears death," Chen said coldly, "even hive minds. We just need to show them death in ways they haven't experienced before." One of the human officers stepped forward. Commander Sarah Park specialized in psychological warfare. She activated another display showing Zephron communication patterns. The hive mind is their greatest strength and their greatest weakness. They share everything instantly, which means when we hurt one group, all groups feel it. When we broadcast death screams, the entire hive experiences that death. Do it enough times and they start avoiding situations that cause those deaths. The council representatives shifted uncomfortably. The Velthari commander spoke carefully. "You're talking about terror tactics." "I'm talking about effective tactics," Park replied. "The Zephrons don't negotiate. They don't surrender. They only respond to one thing: cost. We make attacking too costly, they stop attacking. It's simple mathematics." Chen brought up the strategic overview. "Here's the plan. We divide our forces into 3 categories: hunters, defenders, and hammers. Hunters are fast strike groups that hit Zephron supply lines and communication nodes. Defenders protect key systems using fortified positions and trap networks. Hammers are our main battle fleets that engage and destroy large Zephron formations." He zoomed in on several systems. "But here's the key difference from your current strategy. We don't fight for honor or glory. We fight to win. That means attacking targets that hurt them most, even if those targets seem dishonorable." "Explain," the Cuvan observer said. He had been watching from his elevated seat, his ancient eyes missing nothing. Chen pulled up an analysis of Zephron logistics. They need resources to sustain their swarm. Food, materials, energy. They get those from the worlds they conquer, so we deny them those resources. We evacuate populations before they arrive. We destroy anything we can't take with us. We make every conquest a burden instead of a benefit." "Scorched earth," the Cuvan said quietly. "Yes," Chen confirmed. "If they want our worlds, they'll get nothing but ash." The Krynox general stood up angrily. "You would destroy your own worlds rather than defend them properly? What honor is there in that?" "None," Chen said flatly. "But honor doesn't matter when your species is facing extinction. Survival matters. Victory matters. Honor is a luxury we can worry about after the Zephrons are defeated." The chamber erupted in argument. Half the council representatives were shouting about the sanctity of warfare and the traditions that separated civilized species from savages. The other half were trying to understand the human strategy. Chen waited patiently for the noise to die down. Finally, the Velthari commander called for order. "These tactics disturb us, Admiral. They seem designed to cause maximum suffering rather than achieve military objectives." "They're designed to end the war," Chen corrected. "Every tactic I've described has a strategic purpose. We're not causing suffering for its own sake. We're applying pressure to force a conclusion. The faster we win, the fewer total casualties on both sides." "Both sides?" another representative asked. "You speak as if the Zephrons are victims in this." "They're the enemy," Chen said. "But they're still living beings. A hive mind intelligence that's trying to survive just like we are. The difference is we're better at it." The Cuvan leaned forward. "I have studied your military history, Admiral Chen. I have seen what humans did to each other before you reached the stars. The wars, the weapons, the atrocities. You refined the art of killing your own kind for thousands of years. Is that what you're bringing to this war?" Chen met his gaze without flinching. "Yes, every lesson we learned, every mistake we made, every terrible thing we discovered works in warfare. We tested all of it on ourselves first. That's what the Council never understood. We don't fear war because we're weak. We fear it because we know exactly how good we are at it." The ancient being was quiet for a moment. "Show me your complete strategy." Chen pulled up the full tactical plan. It was comprehensive and brutal. Strike teams would target Zephron breeding centers. Hunter groups would attack supply convoys and leave no survivors. Psychological warfare would broadcast constant streams of Zephron casualties. Defensive positions would be turned into traps that killed thousands at a time. And when the Zephrons adapted to one approach, humans would shift to another, always staying one step ahead. "We'll also employ strategic deception," Commander Park added. "False intelligence suggesting weak points that are actually traps. Fake communications indicating human positions that lead to ambushes. We'll make them doubt their own information network." "And in space?" the Velthari commander asked. Another human officer stepped forward. "Captain James Rodriguez handled fleet tactics. We don't engage in direct fleet battles unless we have overwhelming advantage. Instead, we use mines, automated weapons platforms, and suicide drones. We make them pay for every meter of space they take. We use their own mass against them. A swarm that size needs supplies constantly. We cut those supply lines and the swarm starves. The Krynox general shook his head. Mines, automated weapons? Where is the courage in that? Where is the honor in hiding behind machines? There isn't any, Rodriguez said simply. But it works. And in 6 months, when we've pushed the Zephrons back to dark space, you can decide whether you preferred honor or survival. The briefing continued for hours. The human officers presented detailed plans for every scenario. They had contingencies for Zephron adaptations, backup strategies for failed operations, and alternative approaches if the primary tactics proved ineffective. It was clear they had spent the 6 months since joining the Council studying warfare, with the same intensity they had once used on each other. Finally, the Kuven called for a break. The Council representatives filed out, talking in hushed voices. Many looked disturbed. They had wanted human help, but they hadn't expected this level of calculated brutality. The Kuven remained behind, approaching Chen directly. "Admiral, I have a question," the ancient being said. "These tactics you describe, scorched earth, terror weapons, targeting of breeding populations, these are considered war crimes by most civilized species. Do humans not have laws against such things?" Chen was quiet for a moment. "We do. We developed those laws after we used all these tactics on ourselves, after we saw what they cost us. Not in casualties, but in what they did to our souls." He looked at the Kuven directly. "Every strategy I presented today violates human military ethics. Every single one. But the Council gave us authorization to do whatever it takes. So that's what we're doing. Does that not trouble you?" "Every day," Chen admitted. "Every hour of every day. But the Zephrons are coming, and they're not going to stop because we have ethics. They're going to kill and consume until they're forced to stop. So we'll be the ones to force them, and when this is over, we'll have to live with what we did, just like we always have." The Kuven studied him. "I begin to understand what your ambassador meant. You don't fear war itself. You fear what it makes you become." "Yes," Chen said, "but we'll become it anyway because that's what's necessary. That's the difference between us and you. You fight wars as tests of strength and honor. We fight wars as problems to solve, and we've spent thousands of years learning how to solve them efficiently." The Kuven nodded slowly. The human counteroffensive began 3 days after the strategy briefing. Hunter groups struck Zephron supply lines in coordinated attacks across 15 systems simultaneously. Defender teams evacuated populations and prepared worlds for denial operations. Hammer fleets positioned themselves for major engagements. The Council watched with fascination and horror as human tactics unfolded. In the Carthage system, human forces evacuated 2 million civilians in 36 hours. Then they destroyed every resource facility on the planet. Food production centers were bombed. Water treatment plants were demolished. Mining operations were collapsed. When the Zephron swarm arrived, they found a barren rock with nothing to sustain them. They had won the system but gained nothing from it. In the Meridian sector, human hunter groups tracked a Zephron supply convoy for 2 days, learning its patterns. Then they struck from 4 directions at once, destroying every ship before the hive mind could coordinate a response. The supplies were meant to support a swarm attacking a core council world. Without those supplies, the swarm had to retreat. In high orbit above Tarsus Prime, human forces laid a trap that killed 30,000 Zephron warriors in 4 minutes. They had placed automated weapon platforms in debris fields, hidden them perfectly, and broadcast fake distress signals. When the Zephrons moved in to investigate, the platforms activated simultaneously. The hive mind felt every death at once, a massive shock to their collective consciousness. And everywhere, on every battlefield, humans broadcast the results. Zephron death screams filled subspace frequencies. Images of destroyed hive ships played on repeat. Captured Zephron drones were released with false information designed to lead attacks into more traps. The psychological warfare was relentless and effective. The Zephrons adapted. They became cautious, then paranoid. They stopped responding to obvious targets. They checked every approach for traps. They divided their forces to prevent single devastating losses. But every adaptation played into human planning. Caution meant slower advances. Paranoia meant wasted resources checking non-existent threats. Divided forces meant vulnerability to concentrated human strikes. 4 months into the counteroffensive, the Council had retaken 12 systems. The Zephron advance had not only stopped but reversed. Admiral Chen's strategy was working better than anyone had predicted. The cost in Zephron casualties was enormous. Human losses were minimal by comparison. The Council military leadership began to believe they might actually win. Then the human research teams made a discovery. Dr. Sarah Kimura led the Xenobiology Division studying captured Zephron specimens. Her team had been working around the clock to understand the hive mind biology, looking for weaknesses to exploit. What they found was more significant than anyone expected. They discovered that Zephron reproduction relied on a specific chemical compound produced only by their queen organisms. Disrupt that compound and the entire hive would lose the ability to reproduce. The implications were staggering. With the right biological weapon, humanity could end the war in weeks rather than years. The Zephron swarm would die out in a generation, unable to replace losses. It would be a final solution to the Zephron threat. Admiral Chen received the report while reviewing casualty figures from the latest engagement. He read it 3 times, then called an emergency meeting with his senior staff. They gathered in a secure conference room, and Chen distributed the research findings. "This could end the war," he said without preamble. "One biological weapon deployed in Zephron space. We target the queen organisms, disrupt their reproductive cycle, and wait. The swarm dies out naturally." Commander Park studied the data. Deployment would be tricky. We'd need to penetrate deep into Zephron territory, but it's doable. 3 stealth ships, multiple redundant systems. The Zephrons wouldn't even know what we'd done until it was too late. "How long until the effect manifests?" Captain Rodriguez asked. 3 to 6 months, Chen read from the report. The current generation of Zephrons would live normal lifespans. They just couldn't reproduce. The hive would slowly shrink until it ceased to exist. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what they were discussing. This wasn't a tactical weapon or a strategic strike. This was genocide. Slow, inevitable, complete extinction of an entire species. "We need to present this to Ambassador Vasquez," someone said. Chen nodded. "I'll contact her now." Elena was in a council diplomatic session when the priority message came through. She excused herself and took the call in a private chamber. Chen explained the discovery and the proposed weapon. Elena listened without interrupting, her face growing pale. "You're talking about making them extinct," she said when he finished. "I'm talking about ending the war," Chen replied, "with minimal additional casualties. The Zephrons continue their current trajectory. We're looking at years of conflict and millions more deaths. This ends it cleanly." "Cleanly," Elena repeated, her voice hollow, "by ensuring an entire species can never reproduce again. By condemning every Zephron alive to be the last generation of their kind. That's your definition of clean?" "It's effective," Chen said. "And it follows the mandate the Council gave us. Do whatever it takes to stop the Zephrons. This stops them permanently." Elena was quiet for a long moment. "I need to discuss this with Earth's government and the Council leadership. This isn't a decision we can make alone. With respect, Ambassador, we don't need Council approval. We have independent tactical authority. I can authorize deployment right now." "Don't," Elena said sharply. "Don't you dare deploy anything until we've talked about this." "That's an order, Admiral." Chen's jaw tightened. "We're losing people every day. Every week we delay is more casualties, more suffering, more death. This weapon ends that." "At what cost?" Elena demanded. "We use this weapon. We prove everything the Krynox said about us. We prove we're exactly the savages they accused us of being. We prove that humans only understand one kind of war, total annihilation." "Maybe that's what's necessary," Chen argued. "Maybe this is who we need to be right now. We can worry about morality after the war is won." "No," Elena said firmly. "Morality isn't something we put on hold. It's not something we come back to later. Either we have principles or we don't. And if we deploy this weapon, we've crossed a line we can never uncross." She took a breath, gathering her thoughts. "I'm calling a meeting. Earth's civilian leadership, Council representatives, military command, everyone. We're going to discuss this properly. And until that meeting happens, the weapon stays theoretical. Understood?" "Understood," Chen said, but his tone made it clear he disagreed. The meeting convened 48 hours later. It was held in a secure facility, with representatives attending through encrypted channels. Earth's Prime Minister spoke first, reviewing the situation and the proposed weapon. Then Dr. Kimura presented the technical details. The biological agent was elegant and specific, targeting only Zephrons, It would cause no immediate harm, just reproductive failure. The extinction would be slow and invisible until it was too late. The Krynox representative was the first to speak. This is the most efficient solution. Deploy the weapon immediately. The Zephrons have shown no mercy. We should show none in return. Several other council members agreed. They had watched worlds burn and populations disappear. The Zephrons had given them no reason for mercy. A weapon that ended the threat permanently seemed not just justified but necessary. But the Veltari commander hesitated. This troubles me. We have fought many wars, but we have never sought the complete extinction of an enemy species. Is that not a line we should not cross? Elena stood to speak. It's exactly that line. This weapon isn't about winning the war. We're already winning through conventional means. Yes, it's slower. Yes, it costs more. But we're pushing them back. We're retaking systems. In another year, maybe two, we'll have them contained and possibly negotiated with. Negotiated? The Krynox scoffed. They're a hive mind that consumes everything it touches. What is there to negotiate? We don't know, Elena admitted. Because we haven't tried. We've been too busy fighting. But has anyone asked why the Zephrons are doing this? What drove them to attack? Are they just mindless consumers, or is there something else happening? Admiral Chen shook his head. It doesn't matter why they're attacking. What matters is stopping them. It matters, Elena insisted. It matters because if we use this weapon without understanding them, we might be committing genocide against a species that's just trying to survive. Just like we are. They attacked us, someone pointed out, and we're slaughtering them by the thousands, Elena countered. We've killed more Zephrons than they've killed of any council species. We've made them afraid to attack human positions. We've shown them we can hurt them badly. Maybe that's enough. Maybe we don't need to make them extinct. The debate raged for hours. Some argued for deploying the weapon immediately. Others wanted more time to study alternatives. A few suggested trying to communicate with the hive mind before taking irreversible action. Earth's Prime Minister listened to all sides, then turned to Elena. Ambassador, you understand the human military better than anyone here. You know what we're capable of. What do you recommend? Elena looked around the virtual meeting room, at the faces of humans who had survived wars of their own. The war continued for 6 more months after the decision not to deploy the biological weapon. Human forces maintained their aggressive strategy, pushing the Zephrons back system by system. The council fleets, now adapted to human tactics, coordinated their efforts better. The Krynox warriors learned to use deception. The Veltari commanders accepted that honor sometimes meant survival rather than glory. And slowly, painfully, the tide continued to turn. But something unexpected happened in the 8th month of the war. A human intelligence team monitoring Zephron communications detected something unusual. The hive mind was broadcasting on frequencies previously unused. The signals were structured differently, more complex. They seemed almost like attempts at language rather than simple coordination commands. Commander Park brought the discovery to Admiral Chen. Sir, I think they're trying to communicate with us. Chen studied the data skeptically. Or it's a new tactic. False signals to draw us into a trap. I don't think so, Park insisted. The pattern repeats across multiple systems. Always on the same frequency. Always when we're not actively engaged in combat. If this were tactical deception, it would be more targeted. Chen authorized a response team to investigate. They set up a communication array in neutral space and broadcast a simple mathematical sequence, the universal sign of intelligence. They waited for 3 days. Then the Zephrons responded with the same sequence but modified. It was proof of understanding. Over the next 2 weeks, human linguists and xenopsychologists worked with the hive mind to establish basic communication. It was slow and difficult. The Zephrons thought as one entity, not individuals. Their concept of self and other was completely alien. But gradually, communication became possible. What they learned changed everything. The Zephrons came from a region of space far beyond the Council's borders. Their territory had been dying for generations, star systems going cold, resources depleting faster than they could replenish. The hive faced extinction. They had sent out swarm fleets in desperate search of new homes, new resources, anything that could save their species. When they found Council space, rich with life and resources, they did what any desperate species would do. They tried to take what they needed to survive. Elena received the report and immediately requested a meeting with Council leadership and Admiral Chen. They convened. In the same chamber where the biological weapon had been debated, Elena presented the findings. "They're refugees," she said simply. "Desperate, aggressive, terrifying refugees. But refugees nonetheless. They weren't attacking us out of conquest or cruelty. They were attacking because they're dying." The Krynox representative was unmoved. "That doesn't change what they've done. They've killed thousands, destroyed worlds. They're still enemies." "They're enemies we can negotiate with," Elena countered. "Now that we can communicate, we can find solutions that don't require extermination." "Theirs or ours?" Admiral Chen looked uncomfortable. "Ambassador, they've shown no sign of stopping their attacks. Even with communication established, they're still fighting." "Because they're still desperate," Elena said. "They don't trust us yet." "Why would they? We've been killing them for months. We need to show them there's another option." Over the next several weeks, human negotiators worked with the Zephron hive mind. They learned about the dying region of space, about the hive's population pressures, about their need for specific resources. And humans, having fought the Zephrons to a standstill, proposed something the Council had never considered: cooperation instead of extermination. The plan was complex. The Council would provide resource-rich worlds in the outer territories, systems that were mapped but not yet colonized. The Zephrons would stop their attacks and withdraw to these new territories. In exchange, they would share their biological technology, which was far more advanced than anything the Council possessed. Trade instead of war. Coexistence instead of conquest. Many Council members opposed the idea. The Krynox delegation was particularly vocal. "We're rewarding aggression. We're giving them what they wanted after they attacked us." But Elena had support from unexpected places. The Kuvan backed the proposal. The Velthari, having seen the cost of continued war, agreed that negotiation was worth attempting. And crucially, the human military leadership supported it. Admiral Chen, despite his reservations, acknowledged that a negotiated peace was preferable to years more of fighting. The proposal passed the Council vote by a narrow margin. The Zephrons, desperate and weakened by months of losses, accepted the terms. Slowly, the war began to wind down. Attacks became less frequent, then stopped entirely. The Zephron swarms withdrew to their new territories. Council fleets stood down from combat operations. After 9 months of brutal warfare, peace emerged not through victory or defeat, but through understanding. 3 months later, the Galactic Council convened a ceremony to honor humanity's role in ending the war. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood in the Great Chamber once again, but this time the atmosphere was different. Council representatives rose to their feet as she entered. The Krynox delegate, who had once mocked human weakness, now nodded with something approaching respect. The Kuvan spoke first. "Ambassador Vasquez, Fleet Admiral Chen, and the representatives of humanity. The Council recognizes your extraordinary service during the Zephron War. Your tactics, strategy, and sacrifice saved countless lives and systems. We wish to award humanity the highest military commendation the Council can bestow, and to formally upgrade your status from protected species to full military partner." The chamber erupted in applause, but Elena didn't smile. She looked at the human delegation standing with her, and what she saw troubled her. Admiral Chen looked older than his years, his face lined with stress and something darker. Commander Park stood at attention, but her eyes were distant, haunted. The other officers and diplomats all showed similar signs. They had won the war, but they didn't look like victors. Elena stepped forward to accept the commendation, but instead of a thank you speech, she said something no one expected. "We cannot accept this honor." The chamber fell silent. The Kuvan looked puzzled. "Ambassador?" Elena gestured to the humans standing with her. "Look at us, counselors. Really look at us. Do we look like people who deserve celebration?" The council representatives looked closer. They saw what Elena meant. Every human in the delegation showed signs of deep psychological stress. Some had trembling hands. Others couldn't maintain eye contact. Admiral Chen's jaw was clenched so tight it looked painful. These weren't triumphant warriors. They were survivors of something terrible. "We did what you asked," Elena continued, her voice quiet but clear. "We fought your war using our methods. We killed thousands of Zephrons. We used tactics that violated every rule of honorable warfare. We broadcast death screams. We destroyed breeding centers. We poisoned supplies. We turned warfare into industrial slaughter, and we were good at it." "Very good," she paused, gathering her words. But every action we took, every order we gave, every tactic we employed, we knew they were wrong. We knew we were doing things that violated our own ethics, and we did them anyway because you needed us to, because the Zephrons were coming and someone had to stop them. The chamber remained silent. Elena continued. You honor us for courage, but we feel shame. You praise our strength, but we feel diminished. You celebrate our victory, but all we can think about are the methods we use to achieve it. This is what we tried to tell you from the beginning. This is why we dread war, not because we can't win, not because we lack courage, but because we know the real cost. She turned to face Admiral Chen. Admiral, tell them what this war cost us. Chen stepped forward reluctantly. I have 23 officers under psychiatric care. 2 have attempted suicide. Dozens more show symptoms of severe trauma. And that's just the leadership, and the soldiers who actually fought, who actually pulled triggers and dropped bombs, they're even worse. We won the war, but we lost something in the process. Something we may never get back. Commander Park spoke next. I ran psychological warfare operations. I broadcast Zephron death screams for weeks. I created propaganda that made the enemy afraid to leave their ships. I was efficient. I was effective. And now I can't sleep without hearing those screams. I did my duty and it broke something inside me. One by one, the human delegation spoke. Each told their story. Each described the weight they carried. Each explained that victory had cost them more than the Council could see. They had become the warriors the Council needed, but in doing so, they had betrayed their own principles. They had proven they could wage total war, and now they had to live with that knowledge. When the last human had spoken, Elena turned back to the Council. You wanted to know if humans would fight when necessary. You've seen the answer. Yes, we'll fight. We'll fight with every terrible skill we've developed. We'll use every brutal tactic we've perfected on ourselves. We'll win your wars. But this is what it costs us. This is what we become. And this is why we spent 150 years trying to avoid exactly this situation. The Krynox delegate stood. His forearms were crossed, but his expression had changed. I called you cowards once, humans. I said you feared war.